Sweta, would you like to maybe recap what we talked about from the legal side and carried interest?
Yeah, sure. So at the last session, we touched on sort of the legal aspects of what you should expect from your carried interest documentation. So that's carried interest and also team co-invest as well, if that's relevant to you. We discussed a little bit about the key documents. They're set up on the screen there. So the key one really is the limited partnership agreement with the LPA. This is a document that has all the, all of the terms relating to your carried interest and team co-investment in there. So it's a really, really key document, and you should ensure that you read this through thoroughly. The subscription agreement form of adherence, that's just the document by which you become a limited partner and you sign up to the LPA. So again, it's an important document. Section 431 election form, this is a tax form. And actually one of the key things that we spoke about last time was that it's really important to get your own tax advice, especially if you're coming into the fund at a later stage once it's already been established and you're then getting carried interest, because there are some adverse tax implications of receiving your carry later in the life of the fund. So clearly tax is a really key consideration. Other important sort of issues to consider: carry allocations, so whether the carry is being allocated all on day one with a reserve left for you to join, and also dilution mechanics in the LPA as well, and how that kind of works. Vesting schedules and leaver provisions, these are the key provisions in the LPA and the ones that will have the most bearing on you. So this is something to read through in quite a lot of detail to understand the implications that it has for you. Clearly team co-investment is not relevant for absolutely everyone, but to the extent that your firm requires you to make a co-investment or offers you that opportunity, then clearly that is something to bear in mind. And that comes with its own leaver provisions as well, and also just generally how proceeds work from team co-investment as well. It's important to understand from the LPA as well, and also if you ever have to transfer your interest, then that's something that you should also look into, and again that's contained in the LPA. So the key takeaway was that you should ask for as much information as you can, and try and get your hands on the LPA and to read it through thoroughly.
Great, thank you, Sweta. Thanks for the summary. So as I mentioned, from the last session, we went through a lot of content and thoughts, but we had so many questions from the community that we didn't get to answer all of them. So we still have a few questions we thought we start answering here, and we're looking forward to receiving your questions. So please think about relevant questions that you have and use the chat function to drop them in there. Otherwise we won't meet the entire hour, so let's see. How to negotiate a higher salary with a boss if there is no HR function or not available? I think that's a question for Caitlin. What do you think about that?
So I think there are probably a couple of things to think about here. And Eva, maybe you can jump in from a recruiting point of view, because I think there's almost two different situations. There's the when you're joining a firm and you may or may not have had some contact with HR or the right person in HR to get more information. So you're dealing directly with your hiring manager. Or this might be a situation where it says if unavailable. So you're dealing directly with your line manager, et cetera. And I would reiterate some of the things I said before. So I would come from a point of understanding where you fit in the market, both internally and externally, like, some competitive benchmarking around what other people at other firms are earning at your level. Have a review for yourself of how you've been performing on key metrics, what responsibilities you've had, what impact you've had on the firm, on the fund, and come in with some data and a hypothesis of where you should be, if you feel you are underpaid or that you deserve a step up, come in with some real good rationale for that. Ask a lot of open-ended questions around, what's expected of you, what you'd need to do to move the dial, if it's a no right now, what do you need to do? What do you need to prove, et cetera? And try to get some real specifics from those answers so that you know where you sit and you can move towards those things. But I would say, be pretty open to the conversation. It might take a couple of iterations. They might not, they might need to go speak to some other people and do some research on their own as to where you sit and really understand if maybe you are being underpaid. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'd say for if you're in the firm, but even maybe you have, because you're in a very strong position when you're first joining as well. And I think from a recruiting point of view, I think it'd be interesting to hear what you say.
Yes, that's right. And I just want to refer to a question that has come into the chat box just now by Janet, which really links into that question that we just discussed. How do you arm yourself with data? How do you know that you're underpaid? And what are the sources? How can you get this data on comp and carry? I think, well, firstly, try to get your hands on compensation data. I think one tool you should use is your recruiter. Build some relationships with good headhunters or recruiters that know the market. They're the closest you can get on the pulse that you can come, who sit on the pulse of the time. Because even compensation reports are maybe 1 or 2 years old until they reach you. So I would say try to build your network and get data from peers as well as headhunters who can give you guidance on what the salary levels are in your range. And think about, you have to compare yourself to others in terms of what is your experience. You can't really compare by title. It has to be actually relevant, so you can get the most realistic picture of what your pay grade can be, and back it up with compensation reports. So we have shared a couple of those reports on carry, on comp ranges in our LinkedIn group. So I'm happy to share those with you. They are, you mentioned one, Janet, PE firms like mid-sized PE firms. Yes, PER publishes a good one, but also other firms like Heidricks and Struggles have a detailed report, Prekin or Arxton Partners. So there's a number of sources that we can guide you towards.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It can be frustrating because a lot of those reports, the PER one is a good one and pretty accessible, but it's not super detailed. So there are a lot of roles that are kind of lumped together, and it's hard to decipher where you'd actually fit in. So I would reiterate that knowing a couple of recruiters that can give you some real-time data and also translate, because titles vary from firm to firm. So asking a friend and finding out doesn't give you a whole, it doesn't give you a picture of all the info. So understanding where your specific experience fits in, a recruiter can really help you with that. And they may have access to some of the reports that individuals would have a hard time getting their hands on because they're sold to firms. They're sold to the private equity firms so that they can do some, benchmarking internally. So they're not as accessible as maybe the PER report is.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that's insightful. How to approach the conversation if you discover a male or a peer is paid more? Do you have any guidance on that, Caitlin? Like, how do you approach the HR, or who do you approach? What do you do when you find out that there's a gap?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, and obviously we can't really ask who asked this question because I would want to dig in a little bit further. But off the top of my head, I would try to understand what you're looking at. So are you looking at a base salary, which I would expect very much to be in line by levels, or are you looking at the overall package and the value of carry and all of that, where you start to get some variables from people to people. So understanding what you're looking at, how true that information is. You know, I don't know for sure if this person has the detail broken down by the actual mail, you know, has shared that information, or if it's part of the picture. And I'd have a conversation with either, you know, who you feel comfortable going to have sort of a private conversation about it. And it would be, you know, possibly one of the partners in your firm, your manager. Your manager may not have the data depending on where you sit in the organization. So expect that they may have to go off and speak to someone else. You know, if there's a senior HR person you can talk to, because it's a really tricky thing to understand what's behind this question. I probably naively assume that there's a framework in place so that this doesn't happen like for like, but I imagine it probably does. I haven't personally seen it, but it, you know, it's something that needs to be addressed, and having the information at hand is helpful. Having a conversation with someone that you trust to get the ball rolling, get some advice on who to approach about it and what to do. I don't know if other people have, I don't know if people would be comfortable sharing if other people have had experience with this. I'd be happy to have an offline conversation to understand better, because, you know, it shouldn't be that way. Like, bottom line, it shouldn't be that way. If you're talking about the same exact roles, the same exact performance, same experience, then there shouldn't be a difference. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I would start with a conversation with someone you trust that's in a position to get some more information or sort this out for you internally. You know, we talked about sponsors in the last meeting, like having someone kind of looking out for you. And in the situation where it's a male-female discrepancy here, trying to find a senior male to help you think through these issues and how to approach it, and also raise the profile of it for you. I mean, I know that there might be situations where it may be slightly toxic and not necessarily fixable, in which case, you know, if that's really built into the DNA of the firm, I would personally be thinking about maybe going somewhere else. I know that's not an easy decision, but it would definitely raise a red flag for me if you fought really hard for that and then were seen as difficult afterwards. That's, you know, that stinks. And I know that a lot of people have found support through someone senior that's maybe not their line manager, but someone who can, you know, help them think through the negotiations and think through what they need to bring to the table, and also speak on their behalf at times, you know, behind closed doors. So if that's an option, if there's someone who could be in your corner that you could start to have a relationship with, and bounce ideas off of, that might be a way forward.
Yeah, really important, the concept of allyship and sponsorship. I just want to highlight that. Okay. The next question is a question on, well, it kind of links into the previous one. How do you have the compensation conversation after you've had it on a few unsuccessful occasions? So what else can you do if there's another round of negotiation and discussion and you just feel you don't get anywhere? Are there any techniques or any recommendations that you can give, Caitlin?
So there's probably a couple of things at play here. I know at the more junior end of the scale, there's probably less flexibility in compensation. Base salaries are probably set to be, you know, almost like grades. You know, you get this at this level and people don't come in on different packages. The variable would probably be the performance bonus. And in some places, there's not that much variation in performance bonuses at the junior level. As you get more senior, there's more things that are variable in the package. You know, how much carry you get, the performance bonus. There's probably a bit more banding within the base salaries. So there's a couple of things here, like understanding where you are. If you're junior and it's super rigid as far as what your compensation is, it may be having a bit more focus on the long game, you know, time to promotion, what you can do to impact your promotion, etc. If it's something where you've hit a wall with someone, maybe they're just not interested in having this conversation, but they've been the one you've been having it with, I would try, you know, maybe a conversation with HR, maybe a conversation with an informal mentor, get some advice on how to approach it. And I would ask the question, like, what do I need to do? Like, is it a non-starter based on, you know, internal factors that won't change? Or are there things I can do that would impact my compensation? You know, and have them, you know, try to get some information out of them around what it is. It might be that there is no movement at that level or until the next promotion or some other factor, but trying to understand that and opening up the conversation to someone else who might be able to help. And I mean someone else who might be able to help, not necessarily, you know, a peer who might not be in a position to help you. I'm not sure if that's super helpful, but I think understanding where you sit, what's flexible, what's not, and it's really important to empower yourself with information around what you can influence, and timelines and what the process is.
Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin.
Sorry,
I think
and
that's a really good point on.
Yeah, I'm just going back to the chat. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat as well. There was a question around getting apple-to-apple comparisons with other firms. Really tricky, especially when you're talking about carry and the whole structure. But again, I would look at trying to talk to a search for a recruiter that you know in the space that can almost translate for you. And they would have, as Eva mentioned, they might have more pulse data, like more real-time data than these reports, which are, people fill them out a year later. So it could be a year to 18 months behind if there have been big changes. So finding someone who's in the market, that knows the market, that can help translate for you, I think is useful.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. The next question will take us to Carrie. How much carry, sorry, my Wi-Fi. How much does carry vary between core deal team members of a fund investment team and other senior team members, investor relations or legal? Is this something, Sweta, that you can talk to?
Yeah, sure. So from a legal perspective, I think the bottom line here is that the approach that firms take varies like hugely. In smaller firms where IR and legal roles were, for example, key in the setup of the fund, then you see, you know, very little difference when compared to the deal team. It's a flatter structure, and therefore, you know, that leaves scope for carry to be distributed more evenly. But with larger managers, there is likely to be a larger discrepancy there. And I'd say that's the industry standard, but it's not. It is very much specific to firms, and you know, obviously any firm can put in place any kind of carry allocation that they want. I know, for example, one of my clients offers carry at every level in the fund, including for personal assistants and receptionists. So clearly in that scenario, there is quite a big discrepancy between what the deal team are getting and what individuals sort of lower down in the hierarchy are getting as well. But the key line there is that actually it varies a huge deal.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Next question from the audience, from Devon. when leaving a fund where you have carry, where is it officially determined if you are a good leaver or a bad leaver? If you are a good leaver, are you entitled to receive LP communications going forward, like the quarterly report? And what are your rights?
Well, I think it's important to understand that all of your rights and obligations are contained in the limited partnership agreement. So that'll be the document that sets out exactly, what constitutes a good leaver, what constitutes a bad leaver. There might even be an intermediate category in there. So the key place to look is the LPA, and again, LPAs are very heavily negotiated, so the terms do vary quite a lot. Again, so there is no necessarily an industry standard of what constitutes a good leaver. In terms of what you're entitled to, if you are a good leaver, it's not the case that you will definitely get LP communications going forward. Because you're a leaver, you are no longer a limited partner in that vehicle, and therefore the managers have a good argument to say, actually, why should you receive any LP communications going forward, or any quarterly reports or annual reports like that. But in terms of what your actual rights are, I definitely recommend trying to look at the LPA and seeing what actually happens when you are a leaver.
I hope that answers the question. There's a follow-up question on Sweta's point. Good leavers can continue to have an entitlement to carry, subject to vesting. In some situations, therefore, if you are still a partner, shouldn't you continue to have access rights to limited partnership information? To what extent can such access rights be limited?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're entitled to carry and you're a good leaver, so therefore, you are still getting that carry entitlement. I think one thing to flag is that the legal documents do not say that you automatically will have rights to LP reports and annual reports, etc. So if you are joining a fund and you have the ability to negotiate that into the LPA, then that's something that you should definitely look into, even if it's a separate confirmation from the firm that you will get this information, despite the fact that you're a good leaver, despite the fact that you've actually left the firm. But that is something that you will need to factor into your negotiations and to make sure that you get that added in.
Okay, next question. Sweta, I think that goes to you again. You mentioned that you can lose your vested carry when you leave. What is the point then of having a vesting schedule on carry in the first place? I would have thought that once you were vested, the stake is yours. Certainly this is how it works. Vested under stock when you work for a public company.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's different public versus private, but certainly in the private sphere, the reason for having a vesting schedule is to basically, you can't tell on day one how much carry will arise, and therefore the vesting schedule just allows you to sort of apportion that carry as and when it arises during the life of the fund. So that's the reason for having a vesting schedule. The fact that you can lose your vested carry, that's only, to flag, that is only if you are a bad leaver, i.e. you leave and join a competitor. So it's quite a specific circumstance. But that's unfortunately how the sort of industry has developed in terms of the bad leaver provisions.
I think there's one more question for Sweta and then one more for Caitlin before we can wrap up. Otherwise, please, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Sweta, if you have the opportunity to take an equity stake in a GP, how is this monetized over time?
Yeah, so I presume the question here is that, if you're offered the chance to become a member of the LLP agreement that governs the general partner, like I say, the governing document here is the limited liability partnership agreement, and that is the agreement that will contain all of the terms of your membership. So, ranging from things like your entitlement to holiday, there'll be separate leaver joiner provisions in there as well, and separate bad leaver good leaver provisions. It'll also be the place where the various restrictive covenants will be as well. So important to read that. In terms of the monetization of your interest over time, typically, this is done through the award of profit share points. So, i.e., in each fiscal year, you get drawings from the partnership. For example, that might be guaranteed drawings of X percentage of the profits and losses. There might also be a bonus, for example, for good performance of the LLP, where performance has been strong. But I would say that, again, these terms vary quite a bit. So really important to read the LLP agreement that governs the GP in order to understand how your interest will monetize, specific to your circumstances.
Okay, thanks. And a last question addressed to Caitlin. It's a question about perception and I think a gender perception point. Will negotiating your compensation make or break your perception as a female in the company? Will you be perceived as pushy or rational? I think that's that's a bias, unfortunately, that comes into play here, but it's something that actually gets addressed frequently, where females feel their perception changes when they actually go into a discussion like Ellen mentioned earlier. What's your view on that, Caitlin?
I don't think there's any one answer to this. I think there are times when you can be perceived as pushy. I think the word is probably irrational that in the question. I think the best way, the same things I probably said before, but especially if you might be, which oftentimes women are, a small part of the population at their level, but they might be the only woman at their level. They might be only speaking to men about these topics. So I think the best piece of advice I have is to just be as prepared as possible, be as data driven as possible, help them help you as far as laying out the rationale, asking questions, like don't go in as a make or break, have ongoing conversations about how you can impact things through performance, etc. What they're looking for from you. And I would look for some support, especially if these are high stakes conversations where it's your first time having this conversation. And that support could be through, a peer elsewhere in the industry, through someone who plays a mentor role for you within the firm, maybe a colleague who's quite good at negotiating. Or you could, work with a coach, work with a trainer, get some training around negotiation and personal impact. That could be, if we're talking about high stakes conversations, or, if you're very new at this, I would at least talk about it with one person who could be supportive in helping you think through how to approach it. I don't think, I'd like to think that you don't come across as pushy if you're prepared and you aren't being pushy, or you aren't being like super cut and dry in those conversations, as long as it's collaborative. But if you're worried about it, or you haven't had these conversations before, or you have and they haven't been successful, get some support with this in one form or another. Find someone who's really good at these types of conversations and ask them to help you prepare.
Great, thank you. There's one more question from Janet coming in, and it doesn't sound naive. Is it usual or unusual to get carried docs or LPAs or fund employment docs legally reviewed upon joining a new fund? Sweta, I think I know what the answer is. It really should be reviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of like a legal review, clearly that comes with additional cost if you then have it reviewed. I think where where we've seen it done in the past is where there are, very senior individuals who are potentially getting a lot of carry or have the ability to negotiate the documents. They get it legally reviewed. I mean, to the extent, you feel that you would find comfort in having a sort of legal backing to the documents, then this should be done. And there are, firms that can obviously help with that. But yeah, really it depends. Once you get the documents, you should absolutely review them yourself as well, just in case you feel that you understand the terms that are being offered to you. In terms of, would it look bad to the fund if you do it? Absolutely not. Carry entitlement and co-invest obligations are, particularly, they can be big obligations, and they can be quite a financial commitment as well. So it just shows that you're well prepared. I don't think it would look bad at all.
Yeah, thank you so much. With 4 minutes left, an hour goes really fast. Thank you so much, Sweta and Caitlin, for joining us again. Nitisha would like to say a few final words to wrap up, and we hope that this was useful. Thanks everybody for asking your questions. If there are any follow-up questions or things that you would like to discuss next, or if this is a topic that we should talk more about, maybe around a different specific topic, please let us hear your thoughts and feedback. And we'll be in touch with a feedback survey or a few questions later on per email and the LinkedIn group. But thanks from my side.